Alright Buccaneers, it is Fumane and welcome to my channel. If you are new here, this channel is all about making sense of football. Just honest conversations, reflecting and talking about the game we all love. And today I want to talk about Orlando Pirates 2, Durban City 1 in the MTN8 semi-final. Now obviously yesterday we saw Orlando Pirates play Durban City at the Orlando Amstel Arena. And I think it was a game that, in the end, Pirates will be happy to have won. But I don't think it was necessarily the most convincing performance from Orlando Pirates. And I think that's probably the best place to start. I think maybe let me start there. There was obviously a lot that was spoken about this game because of the comments that were made by the captain of Durban City, Nganana, in light of that previous fixture where Orlando Pirates were playing Durban City last season, where he said that Orlando Pirates were just a name. And I know that because of those comments, there were a lot of people who came into this particular game expecting that Pirates were going to absolutely massacre Durban City, absolutely destroy them. It became part of the build-up. It became part of the conversations around this particular game. But here's the thing. Personally, I don't really want to spend too much time on opposition players when they're saying things that are disrespectful or unnecessary. Okay? Especially because I don't want this podcast to become a place where I'm dissecting what another player said simply because I don't like what they said. Now, if a player has a brilliant performance, so if an opposition player plays very well against Orlando Pirates, I'll give them credit. I usually do that on this platform. But I don't think we need to honor comments like that by spending 10 minutes talking about them. So I'm not going to dwell on that. I acknowledge that it added a little bit of spice to the game. And I understand why people were looking forward to this particular game. But in light of those comments, I think the game itself was actually, I would say, underwhelming in light of the comments. Because people expected Pirates to come out and absolutely dominate Durban City and prove Nganana wrong. And ultimately, Pirates win the game 2-1. But they needed extra time to do it. And for a large portion of this game, Pirates were actually playing against 10 men. They're actually playing against a team with a red card. Durban City received a red card and Pirates had numerical advantage for a significant portion of the game, a significant amount of the game. So when you put all of that together, I think you can understand why I personally came away from this game thinking, yeah, Pirates won, but there is still a lot here that we need to talk about. So, because I don't think Pirates were particularly good. And I think that's a fair thing to say. And I think the first thing I want to talk about is Patrick Maswanganyi, because I actually want to come out and say this quite clearly. I thought Patrick Maswanganyi deserved to be man of the match yesterday. Nganana got man of the match. I thought Patrick Maswanganyi deserved it. And I know that might sound strange when I'm about to spend a lot of this video talking about how poorly Pirates played as a team. But I think that's exactly why I want to say it. Because Patrick Maswanganyi came into this game with a lot of criticism behind him. A lot of people were bashing him on the internet. There were people questioning whether he should even be playing. I had people commenting on my previous video and videos on TikTok telling me that I was wrong to predict that he would start against Durban City because he was injured. And people were going so far as to say, thank God Patrick Maswanganyi is injured. That's how bad it is. That's the criticism that Tito has been receiving from Orlando Pirates fans. Thank God that Maswanganyi is injured. And from the beginning, I thought you could see the quality of Tito. And this is something I've said about Patrick Maswanganyi before on this channel and on Talking Buccaneers, for those who recognize my face from Talking Buccaneers. I think his quality really comes through when Tito is in that team mentality state. I've said that before. When he's not trying to prove anything to anyone. When he's just playing football. When he gets into that flow state where he seems to understand what the game needs from him. Because you'll see him drop deep, but he'll drop deep because that's where the space is. That's where the opposition are giving him space. He'll run beyond the striker, but he'll do it because that's what the situation requires. He'll take an extra touch. He'll hold onto the ball. And sometimes you will look at it and think, why is Tito dwelling on the ball so much? Why is he staying on the ball and not moving it on? But then you realize that he's attracted 2 or 3 players of the opposition towards him by dwelling on the ball. And that's the point. He's manipulating the opposition. That's what he's doing when he's dwelling on it. He's trying to understand, where is the space? How can I influence the game? He's trying to understand what the game needs in that moment. And I think yesterday he was playing at that level of Tito just being, Tito on steroids. And obviously he capped it off by scoring the penalty that gave Pirates the lead. Moremi does brilliantly in that moment to press Durban City as they're trying to build from the back. Some would say very brave of Durban City to come at Orlando Stadium and try and build. Moremi wins the ball. He nicks it off of the center back. I think it might have been Ganana. I might stand to be corrected. And as he's about to get the shot away, he gets fouled in the box. Penalty to Pirates, and Tito steps up and sends the goalkeeper the wrong way. We've seen that before. Beautiful penalty. And for me, it was a fitting way for him to finish what I thought was a really good individual performance in the first half. And because I was at the stadium yesterday, I actually noticed something during the time in which Pirates were, doing pitch inspection and then warming up before the game starts. So the players were taking their shots at goal, this and that player, the coaches give them the ball and they take shots. And Tito was scoring quite a few. But more than that, he was doing those dummy shots where he sends the goalkeeper one way and puts the ball the other way. And with Patrick Maswanganyi, you've seen it before. That's not a coincidence. That's something that he's actually good at. Those dummies, some you remember his penalty against Kaizer Chiefs in the Soweto derby. He has that ability to manipulate the goalkeeper and opposition. So when he stepped up for that penalty and sent him the wrong way, I particularly wasn't surprised. And I want to spend time on Tito because I think sometimes the conversations around these players becomes very one-sided. When a player is bad, we are quick to bash them. We are quick to just throw these harsh words at them. When a player makes mistakes, we talk about all the reasons why they shouldn't be playing for Pirates, and I think sometimes you need to pause and say, no, this player was actually really, really good for Pirates yesterday. And I think Patrick Maswanganyi deserved that because I know Pirates weren't great yesterday. They didn't have their best game. And I know this is a team sport, and when the team doesn't perform, we have to analyze the team in its entirety. But I also don't want that to mean that we ignore an individual performance because the team as a whole wasn't good. So by saying that, I want to say hats off to Patrick Maswanganyi, who played for a Pirates team yesterday that wasn't good. This is the performance that we know is in you. And actually, I think the reason you are criticized so heavily, Tito, is because people know the level you are capable of, and they know your ceiling. They know that on your day, you are the best number 10 in South Africa. And yesterday, we saw a little bit more of that player again. But having said all of that, up until that point where Tito scored, I still thought Orlando Pirates were very, very unconvincing. I really think they were poor. And I think the biggest problem for me was a lack of genuine goal threat. I know we didn't dominate, but I think the biggest thing was the lack of goal threat. Because when you look at the way this Orlando Pirates team is currently set up, you can actually understand why someone like Relebogile Mofokeng finished last season as the club's top scorer, you know. And I think it's quite telling, because if you look at the current front four, you've got Ozone Apollos, say, playing on the right, Tshepang Moremi playing on the left, Yanele Mbuthuma playing as the main man up front, with Patrick Maswanganyi playing behind them in these two games that we've watched this season. Now, on paper, it makes sense for Pirates to line up in that way, but where are the goals going to come from? Because Apollos on the right is naturally going to come inside, but he's not going to take shots. He's just passing when he's playing there. He's dropping into spaces. He's trying to create. Patrick Maswanganyi is doing something similar. I would say dropping into spaces, trying to create things. He's looking for where the space is so that he can influence the game, right? And then with Tshepang Moremi, I think he's quite unpredictable. That's the way that I would put it. When Moremi is attacking the box and looking to get onto the final pass, that's where I think you see the best version of Tshepang Moremi. But when Moremi is being asked to sort of come inside and be involved in, say, creating chances, I think you see the worst version of Tshepang Moremi. Because Moremi is at his best when you give him space to attack. I really think that's not an unfair thing to say. When you allow him to run, when you allow him to get into the box from the left, sort of just coming in, when you give him that final action where he's supposed to finish off like a chance, you know, that's where we see the best version of Moremi. And currently, he's constantly having to come deep to participate in the play. And you're taking away from his biggest strength. I don't know if that's him doing that or it's the coach that asking that of him. Then you've got Mbuthuma, and this is where I really struggle, because I don't want to participate in, again, what I said, like bashing players. And I don't want to bash Mbuthuma. I don't think that helps anybody. I don't think it helps us, no Mbuthuma, no Pirates. But at this point, if I'm looking at what is best for Orlando Pirates as a team, I think there is a legitimate argument for him to come out of the starting 11. I really do. And the reason is very simple. Pirates need somebody who is going to score goals. That is what this team is begging for. It has been for a while now. And shout out to the club, because they've brought in Sebastian Pedersen. I made a video talking about that for exactly that reason, scoring goals. But yesterday you could see the problem. Pirates were sort of creating situations where you were thinking someone needs to run into spaces and put the ball in the back of the net, for goodness sake. Someone needs to put the ball in the back of the net. And Mbuthuma is not just struggling with finishing. I think he's also struggling with sensing where he needs to be to finish. He often is a split second late. And when you're a number 9, that split second is everything. Because you don't need 3 touches or a lot of seconds. Sometimes you need 1 touch. The ball comes across, you anticipate it, you're in the right space, you hit it first time. You arrive before the defender, you finish. And that's the instinct I'm not particularly seeing consistently enough from Mbuthuma. I've seen it 1 or 2 times last season, but that's not nearly enough compared to the volume of opportunities. And I understand the argument that he runs channels, he presses relentlessly, he's a hard worker, he makes it difficult for defenders to live with him because he's always hurrying them. All of that is valuable. Now, I understand that in the modern game, but I'm always asking myself, what is the trade-off? Because if you have a striker who's doing all of those things, but isn't getting himself into positions where he can actually finish chances, then what are you gaining for what you are losing? Does it compare? Especially when the rest of the attack is already structured around players who want to create. Because if Muremi isn't scoring and Mbuthuma isn't scoring, and Patrick Maswanganyi is dropping in order to influence the game, and so is Apollo, suddenly you've got nobody in the box and nobody scoring. And for me, that's exactly what I thought we saw yesterday. I know there were many frustrations, but I think the frustration was if you just had someone in the box, we would be less frustrated. I think Pirates had a lot of the ball, and I say a lot because even if it was only slightly beyond 50%, that's still a significant amount of possession. But what were they doing with it? What were Pirates doing with the ball? Durban City did quite well to allow Pirates to play sort of in front of them. Pirates had the ball, but there wasn't enough penetration through Durban City. There weren't enough players arriving in the box. There wasn't enough of that instinctive movement where you feel like somebody is smelling where the chance is going to fall or where the chance is going to come from. And that's why if I were making the changes at halftime, I would have been looking at Muremi and Mbuthuma. And I'd be thinking to myself, get Muremi off, get Mbuthuma off. Bring Khositsile for Muremi and bring Mbuthuma and Radiopane for Mbuthuma. And then maybe move Apollos into a position where, we've seen what Apollos likes to do. He can come inside more and actually become another goal threat because he'll take those shots when he's coming in from the left, coming inside. And then, when you've got Khositsile on the other side, on the right, you get that directness. You know that he can go outside, he can come inside and also threaten goal. You get the pace, you get somebody who's willing to run at defenders. And I think suddenly the game has changed. And then Apollos can move into, that inside left role, come inside and potentially become involved around the box. And suddenly things look different. That's what I thought, for me, the game needed. I thought at halftime that's what I would have done as the head coach. But I also think we need to talk about the head coach here because I don't think this was one of his best games from the bench. And look, I don't mean that as an attack on Ouaddou. I'm not trying to attack him. I just don't think he influenced the game particularly well with the substitutions. And that's part of how we judge head coaches when the team is not doing well. Coach, what are you going to do? The Sibisi substitution was obviously forced on him. Sibisi was injured. And actually, I think it ended up becoming a really important lesson for people who have been criticizing Nkosinathi Sibisi. I know some of you are out there who criticize Sibisi because I know there are a lot of people who want different players to take his place, particularly Chabatsane. I hear a lot of people asking for because he's left-footed. They want someone else next to Siema. They want somebody younger, somebody who perhaps offers something different on the ball. But you know what? Yesterday, I think we learned something. Not necessarily when Sibisi was on the pitch, but specifically when Sibisi came off. Because suddenly you could see that stability that Sibisi brings to the Orlando Pirates team. You don't always notice it when he's playing. You don't necessarily think, oh yeah, Sibisi is on and we've got stability. That's actually the interesting thing about defenders like Sibisi. That something you notice about them is when they're off, they're missing. You realize Sibisi is reliable. He's experienced. He's a leader, and specifically when he's off. And I think he's an important member of this Orlando Pirates team. But yeah, he came off. Zulu comes on in his place, and Durban City suddenly find a way through Orlando Pirates. The mistake comes from that side of Zulu where he slips, and suddenly Durban City is in, they score. Now, I'm not saying Zulu is a bad player. I'm not necessarily saying that. I need time to actually watch him. I don't think he's a bad player. That's why he's at Orlando Pirates. I'm not saying that one mistake defines who he is. I don't think that's fair. But I think yesterday was a difficult environment to throw him into. I think Pirates were struggling, and I wouldn't have necessarily brought him in, but it was forced because what Pirates needed at that point was stability. And I think that also highlighted how important Siema is in this team. But Siema needs a trustworthy partner next to him. And yesterday, I don't think that partnership gave Pirates the same stability that they had before Sibisi went off. And I thought it was an important lesson. And then we get into the second half of proceedings. And I think Durban City start to realize that they could actually get something from this game. You know, I think they smelt it. They started imposing themselves on Pirates on the counter-attack. And that's where I became even more frustrated. Because, come on, guys, you are playing against 10 men at the Orlando Amstel Arena. You have the numerical advantage. Durban City, I think, are coming thinking Pirates is going to thrash us here. You have the better players, and yet you are allowing the opposition to believe they can actually win the game with 10 men. And that is where, for me, Pirates were utterly disappointing. I don't think it's because the game was tough. I think it's because, like, you just allowed them. I think the mentality can change when you're playing against 10 men in football. The team with the extra player can become complacent, and the team with 10 men can become even more compact. They can defend deeper. They can say, we're just going to stay in this game until such a point, you know. And if you don't kill the game as the team with the advantage, suddenly the opposition believe. And I think that's exactly what happened. I think Pirates didn't kill the game, and they could have, maybe with different personnel. And I didn't even realize immediately that Durban City had received a red card. You know, when you are at the stadium for one reason or another, it could be something happening around you, your attention does get, taken one way or another. So I didn't necessarily see the red card. And then towards the end of the game, I start hearing, the moans and groans around me. And I realized, wait a minute, Pirates are actually struggling to beat 10 men because people were saying that sort of thing. And that is not something that should happen often at Orlando Stadium, to be fair. I really think that, football is not straightforward to say automatically when you're playing against 10 men, you're going to score 5 goals. It doesn't necessarily work that way in football, but I do think that whatever circumstances you are faced with at Orlando Amstel Arena, that's going to take some getting used to for me. Orlando Pirates should have enough quality to control the game and beat the opposition, especially an opposition with 10 men. I take no excuses for that. And I don't think we saw nearly enough from Pirates yesterday. And then the substitutions came on. Cameron Danson came off. Mukobodi comes on for him. And again, I don't think Mukobodi necessarily played badly. I wouldn't term it in that way. That's not what I'm trying to say right now. But when you bring somebody on in a game like that, I want them to influence the game. I think they have an opportunity to show who they are. I want them to come onto the pitch and say, I'm going to change this. As a new signing, I want to show you guys what I'm about. And I didn't really see that. In fact, I thought Danson, even with his youthful exuberance and naivety, was actually giving Pirates more in the center of the pitch. People say Danson is young and he's too exuberant. He was giving Pirates more in that center. He was willing to receive the ball. He was willing to turn. He was willing to take risks. And sometimes that's what you need. And for me, the substitution off of Danson and Tito was really disappointing, because when you're chasing a game, you don't necessarily need the safest players to come on, people who are going to pass side to side. You need someone who's going to impose himself, who's going to have, I don't want to say it, I'm going to say guts. You know, you need somebody who's going to take responsibility to try and win the game. And I thought that once Danson and Tito came off, Pirates lost a little bit of that, like just the daring nature of wanting to try things. And then eventually the game goes into extra time, and Pirates, yes, finally find their winner through Kampani Lungu from a set piece. And I want to give credit where credit is due. Well done to Pirates for scoring from a set piece. I think that alone is a positive, right? If you're scoring from set pieces, that's something you can build on and you should build on. But there's another way of looking at that, and I think it's slightly concerning, because if the majority of your chances in your scoring comes from set pieces, what does that tell us about how you're attacking in open play? And I think that's the bigger question for me yesterday. I'm like, we're not really doing much in open play. We're scoring from set pieces. Because coming off of last season, when Mufukeng and Apollos were the top scorers, you already had that question hanging over the team to say, like, is someone actually going to put the ball in the back of the net, especially from up front? Who is actually going to score the goals? Because I don't see Apollos and Mufukeng keeping this up for long. And I don't necessarily mind a winger being the top scorer. You know, that's not necessarily the problem that I'm raising. But when you think about, say, Mufukeng, he wasn't necessarily the type of wide player who was constantly attacking the box like a traditionally goal-scoring winger. You know, think of someone like Mo Salah, Cristiano Ronaldo, who, yes, they are naturally strikers who play out wide. And Mufukeng still developing that part of his game. When I think about a wide player who's constantly threatening the goal, I think of someone like Saleng, someone who's created to be that. And that's a different type of threat. So when Mufukeng is the top goal scorer for Pirates last season, I think it should at least make you ask questions, because you know he's not intending to do that, or the team's not really intending to do that. I don't think so. The question should be, where are the goals going to come from for Pirates the following season? And I think that's the question right now I have about this Pirates team, because who is actually going to score for Pirates? And maybe that's why the arrival of someone like Sebastian Pedersen is going to become also important for Pirates, because if we're already sitting in the stands watching three strikers on the books of Pirates, Mahopa, Mbuthuma and Radiopane, and we're already saying, I can't wait to see Sebastian Pedersen play. If we are already missing a player who hasn't even played for Orlando Pirates yet, I don't know if you see it. There already is a problem. It's saying something. It says something about what we're currently seeing from the players who are already playing. And I want to talk about that. Radiopane here as well. I want to talk about him, because Radiopane keeps getting, these small opportunities to come on. And I really think there's a brilliant footballer there. I really do. I watched a lot of Radiopane in the DDC. I think there's a brilliant footballer there. I saw a bit of him at Cape Town Spurs as well. And every time he gets on the ball, you see those glimpses. You see the technique is there. You see that the touch is there. You see why a lot of people have rated him highly when he was a teenager. But I think finishing is starting to show itself as a problem for me with Radiopane. I actually think he needs to be put on a finishing program, sort of like when Scott Chickelday was at Pirates with Chukwumanja and all the strikers at that time, because it's not enough to look like a brilliant footballer. At some point, as a striker, you have to put the ball in the back of the net, Radiopane. And there's another thing I want to say about Radiopane, that although I want to be very careful with this. I don't know what's necessarily going on in his head. I'm not close to Radiopane, so I don't know, right? I don't know what he's feeling. I don't know how much he wants to score. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he doesn't have the desire to. I don't know that for certain. I can't say that for certain. But from the outside, watching him sometimes, his body language gives me the impression that he's lacking a little bit of that desire to score from the outside. That's what it looks like. I don't know if that's the case. And again, that might not be true. I want to emphasize that, right? It might just be the way that he carries himself. You know, the people who look like they're lazy, but they're not really. I know Tito gets that comment a lot. But if there's something missing there, then I think that's something he needs to challenge himself on. Because as a striker, you need to want to score. You need to want to score goals. You need to have that instinct. You need to be desperate to get there before the defenders do. And I think that's what I'm looking for from Radiopane. More than just scoring, I need to want to see him want to do it. Because it's all good and well to have those moments where you look like a phenomenal striker and your hold-up play and the way that you turn and all of that, the way that you score in training. But until you put the ball in the back of the net on match day where it matters most, we can't fully back you, Radiopane. We're going to run out of talking about your days at DDC. And I think he's reaching an age now where he's very quickly not going to be considered a young player anymore. How old is he? Is he like 23, 24? So there needs to be progression. That's what I'm saying. There needs to be a moment where we start seeing the footballer that everybody is catching a glimpse of, that everyone is telling everyone about, that, hey, have you seen Radiopane at DDC? And I don't think it's impossible. I think he has the tools. Like, again, he's got the glimpses. You know it's somewhere there, but the finishing needs to be worked on. And perhaps even that desire that I spoke about, it needs to be challenged to say, hey, Radiopane, we don't know, but you look like you don't have the desire. Because last season, there were chances created for Orlando Pirates that were just begging for somebody with the desire to put the ball in the back of the net and with the instinct to do that. And that's why you start thinking about someone like, say, Tshegofatso Mabasa. Because when the ball lands at Mabasa's feet or in the box somewhere, you see that instinct, that there's that feeling that he wants to kill the chance. He wants to finish it. But with Mbuthuma, I think sometimes you see him wanting to like control the ball. He wants to get it under control somehow. He wants another touch, maybe another touch after that. But sometimes really you just need to just finish it, you know. When the ball bounces, just hit it, like be in front of the defender, get there before him, hit it, put the ball in the back of the net. And that's the difference. And I think that's what Pirates are currently missing. And that's why I'm actually looking forward to seeing Sebastian Pedersen play for Orlando Pirates, because when you watch his clips, he looks like that player who can just hit it first time. He looks like someone who's just come on and give Pirates that instinct that could challenge the way this entire attack functions. And it was actually great, by the way, to see him at the stadium yesterday. And he wasn't even in the substitutes. He was part of like the traveling squad. I think he came with the rest of the squad that just traveled, the likes of Gabriel Jamini, who we haven't seen in a while. But he wasn't on the bench. And yet when the fans saw him, they welcomed him. And I thought it was brilliant. I really appreciate that about Orlando Pirates fans, especially the way that they embraced him in the Norwegian sort of Viking way. You know what I'm talking about? It was great to see that, because there's already this anticipation for watching him play for Pirates. People want to see what this guy can do for us with the chances that everyone is talking about that Pirates creates. And I think that anticipation is just because of what Pirates is currently lacking up front. So ultimately, I think this is one of those games where you can't criticize too much without acknowledging the result, because Pirates won. And I suppose that's the most important thing. You can sit here and say that the performance wasn't hey, it wasn't convincing, this and that. You can say that the substitutions weren't good enough, and the head coach, hey, why didn't you have better players on the bench? Why didn't you influence, the game better? You can say that the attack wasn't good enough. You can say that Pirates should have dominated more, should have had more possession, that sort of thing. And I think all of those things are fair. They are fair things to say, but ultimately they won the game. And when you criticize a team that has won, you have to measure your words a little bit more, because at the end of the day, the assignment for those players, above everything else, was to win the football game. And did they win the football game? They did win the football game. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend that everything is terrible. It's not. No. Not everything is all doom and gloom currently. There are positive things. The team is winning. The last 2 games have been frustrating, but they've won. The team is winning. They're scoring from set pieces. There are individual players like Patrick Maswanganyi who are showing, the quality. Cameron Danson, as a young player, is showing you that he can play at this level, being another one of those players who's coming from that conveyor belt of Pirates development. And there are new players coming in who could potentially solve some of the problems we're talking about, like goal scoring. So I think we're still in a position where you can look at this team and say that there is something here, right? Everyone's criticizing, but there's something here. I think the question is whether everything is going to click. Because if Pirates can sort out that final third issue, if they can find somebody who consistently puts that ball in the back of the net, if Muremi can become more consistent in what we're needing him to do, just run beyond players and score, if Apollos can start adding, that creativity and goals to his game as we expect him, if Tito can continue playing in that flow state that he played in against Durban City, if Danson continues developing, and if the defense can find that stability that you see with Siema and Sibisi, then suddenly this becomes a very different team than what we saw against Durban City. And that's why I'm not overly worried, because I know ultimately it will happen. I'm just sitting here asking these questions after a bad performance, because I think when you're supporting Orlando Pirates, especially with the quality that's in the squad, you have every right to ask questions about how this team was bad on a particular day. You have every right to do that. And maybe that's the biggest thing to take away from yesterday, is that they played badly, but they won. But I don't think they were convincing. I really don't think so. And perhaps that's okay, because the scoreline ended with Pirates 2, Durban City 1. But yeah, I think that's a good place to leave it. I'm going to leave it at the note that Pirates played badly, but Pirates won, and that's the positive we should take.